Hi, it's Conor Svensson here, founder and CEO of Web3 Labs. This is a conversation I had with Weijia Zhang. Weijia is the Vice President of Engineering at Wanchain. Weijia's been focused on blockchain interoperability for a number of years now, and also leads the CrossChain interop working group at the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. In our conversation, we discussed the state of interop with blockchains right now and exactly where we're going and what a successful outcome is for the space. Wage is a very accomplished academic as well as technologist, having invented over 20 patents and published over 30 research papers. So his perspective coming from that field, but also having gone so deep in this space for a number of years now, really comes through here, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of helpful and valuable takeaways from our discussion. Hey, Weijia, it's absolutely great to have you here. I wanted to really get into some a bit more of your history, because you come from a very academic place in terms of you're a you've got a PhD in computer science. Is that correct?
In physics, actually, we
Physics,
focus
sorry.
on science education. Yes.
Yeah. And that obviously gives you an incredible foundation for getting into these sort of technical and scientific-based disciplines, and is certainly shown with your track record in terms of you have over 30 published papers. So it's at around 20 patents as well. I'd love to learn a bit more about your history before you got into Wanchain, and really, the areas of be it physics or technology that you went really deep in that have really helped shape who you are as a person with respect to your engineering.
Yeah. Thank you, Conor. Yeah, well, thank you for a very brief, concise intro, and that's very nice. Yeah, I had a PhD in physics with focus on science education. Basically, I know that in advances of physics, it's more important to teach kids about sciences and engineering. So I took a lot of lessons on cognitive science, psychology, educational psychology, computer science, so that I can use cognitive sciences combined with computer science to teach science and technology, that we call it STEM, to young kids, young people. And then after I got my PhD, I went to Arizona State University to work as a postdoctoral researcher on cognitive research, and that was funded by National Science Foundation. We actually have a very good modeling program for teaching sciences. And then I noticed that education program won't sustain without a very good commercial foundation. So I started to go to private sector. Actually, I worked for Dell for many years, over 10 years. And most of my papers were published on enterprises software and also some education as well. And then 2013 and 2014, there was a time when Dell actually transferred from a public company to a private company. And then engineers were giving opportunities to leave Dell to start their own business. So I was a principal engineer at Dell, so I took that package and founded my own startup for education, basically to teach STEM for K to 12 students, doing the labs and the computer, doing a lot of computing and the kind of IO, IO devices for sensing the physical parameters, and then model them, and then let kids learn from it. That's good science and research, but it doesn't sustain. It's just very difficult to make money in America for science educational companies. So and then in 2017 October, I met Jack, and then he introduced me to Wanchain, and that's how I started blockchain job.
And Wanchain, certainly for those people who aren't aware, your focus really since day one has been around interoperability with other blockchains, seeing the need for provide in the same way that you have routing protocols for with the internet, and allowing organizations to communicate with one another or transfer data across multiple networks. You sort of envisage similar technology being an absolute necessity, of course, for blockchain.
Yeah. I think Wanchain is a very, how do I say, it's a very engineering, the technology focused project. If you look at the white paper of Wanchain, it started in the white paper saying that Wanchain is CrossChain focused project. And then if you look at the architecture diagram, basically it has the Wanchain layer that's connected to different public blockchains. And then on the bottom layer, the Wanchain is connecting to different private blockchains. And then we do exactly the same thing that described in the white paper. So we connect Wanchain with Ethereum blockchain, with Bitcoin blockchain, EOS blockchain, and other blockchains. And then for private blockchains, we also connect with different the private blockchain. We call it consortium blockchains with public blockchain as well. So we connect those blockchains, and now we're advancing to layer 2 blockchain as well, so that you can connect a layer 2 blockchain with another layer 2 blockchain. And that has advantages because with layer 2 to layer 2, you do not need to worry too much about the scalability and performance. And the finality is much shorter. The finality time is much shorter when you compare with the layer 1. So Wanchain is a very engineering focused project that we focus on the engineering side of connecting different blockchains with either homogeneous or heterogeneous blockchains.
Yeah. And where do you think we are with respect to the evolution of interoperability technology? Because it's an area that's come up again and again, and as interest in the technology has increased, of course, more and more people have looked at it, and there's multiple different approaches there too. And everyone, of course, talks about the ability to atomic swaps as being sort of the holy grail of it, so to speak. But how far along do you feel we are in the evolution of it?
Yeah, I think the term interoperability has been an overloaded word, right? A lot of people use interoperability for different things. And with EEA, Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, I'm a co-chair of a CrossChain interoperability work group. And initially, I was using the term interoperability as well. And I noticed that that word is too broad. So we decided to use CrossChain interoperability. So when you talk about interoperability, it could be client interoperability, which is actually client compatibility, and then you have technology interoperability, or source, all the EVM interoperability, or wallet interoperability. Those are different things. What we are focusing here is the CrossChain interoperability, which means that we're building bridges to connect different blockchains for asset, messages, data, and command transfer. So that's what we mean by CrossChain interoperability. And in terms of progresses, when we first started this one, you probably still remember it in the Seattle meeting you were there. And then when we say about CrossChain interoperability, not many people had idea about the use cases for that. So we ended up wrote a use case document, and then we start to build a specification and guidelines for CrossChain interoperability. And today, there's so many CrossChain bridges now. So it's kind of, I feel that it's grown too much, too fast. And not many people actually think about the security and the decentralization and a lot of things, critical things that need to be thought through. Some people just build the bridges without too much thinking. So we need to go back to the basic and define almost like a standardize the CrossChain interoperability, and that's what we are doing with the EEA's CrossChain interoperability work group. We are trying to standardize that and make it more kind of a more holistic rather than the piecemeal solution for building bridges to connect different blockchains.
Yeah, and so certainly with the approach, of course, people listening to this, they'll hear, well, if it's the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance doing it, they're going to be thinking about how you primarily focus on Ethereum compatible chains. But of course, you're looking much wider there with respect to the work you're doing. But with Ethereum, do you feel that there are certain challenges with that type of blockchain network with their account-based model and so on, which creates big challenges for you, or is it something that actually is a bit simpler than you think with some of the other comparable blockchains that are out there? Say when you were originally looking at, say, Bitcoin in the earlier days, you said about linking up with EOS, of course, and there's more and more protocols emerging all of the time.
Yeah, I think with Ethereum, we feel that is the best one to bridge with, because Ethereum has EVM, Ethereum virtual machine. It has smart contract support, and the solidity is very, very stable now. So connecting EVM compatible blockchain with another EVM compatible blockchain is very, very easy. And then there are different ways to do it. You can have a lock account method. You can lock an asset on the source chain and then mint the asset on the target chain, or you can use smart contract to control that, or you can use liquidity pool to control the transfer of asset, or you can do the remote cross-chain function call for smart contract. And I think the challenge is right now is on the cross-chain function call, which is consensus is taking a lead on that one. They're doing the GPAC, the GPACT, which is a cross-chain function call. And if that one is achieved, then the cross-chain become very, very easy. But there are challenges with that, with the scalability and also security, because that's an atomic transaction cross-chain function call. So that's why I see with the EVM compatible cross-chain interoperability. And then for the other one, non-EVM compatible, you either need to have a simulated EVM, or you can use the lock account to facilitate the asset transfer. So I think both are doable, but with EVM compatible blockchains, it's much easier and straightforward.
So you mentioned there about how with some of the non-EVM based blockchains, you could potentially simulate the EVM. And so would that enable you to make use of the cross-chain function call type technology? For instance, with Polkadot, they of course have these pallets that you can run up an EVM there. Almost all of the big protocols are saying, we can support the EVM. Hedera say it with their hash graph, Avalanche say it with theirs, so on and so forth. And so does that kind of simplify the problem somewhat if they have that EVM compatibility?
Yes, that definitely simplify the problem. And there are other chains like Cardano, they have EVM, they have a smart contract engine as well, but they're not compatible with EVM. So there's still things that need to be worked out over there.
Absolutely. And when you talk about, and this is also just for giving a bit more background to the people who are kind of newer to the world of interop. So the idea of a cross-chain function call, of course, that enables you to take code that's running on a smart contract in one blockchain and call in effect code that's on another separate blockchain. When you talk though about the lock and account asset transfer, would that be the traditional approach you often see, where people creates like a wrapped version of like a token on a different network to facilitate transfer?
Yeah. With the lock and mint method, what I call it is a lock and mint unlock burn unlock method, which means that when you want to transfer an asset from a source chain to a target chain, you send the asset to a smart contract or an account or a lock account, and that asset become lockable there. And then there's a relayer or transfer mechanism that notify the target chain about the action and the result of that last source chain. And once it's confirmed, then the smart contract on the target chain actually mint the same value of token on the target chain. And that's why I call it a transfer token, because the token that's minted on the target chain has dependency on the token that is locked on the source chain. And this has implications for security, right? Because both the security of source chain and the target chain are important. If the source chain get hacked, then the asset on the target chain get hacked as well, because there is a dependency over source chain as well. Yeah, so that is a very straightforward methodology, and you can either do the atomic transaction, or you can do the trusted relayer. If the relayer is trusted, then when the source chain is locked, the asset locked in the source chain, then the target chain can mint the same value of token on the target chain, but that has a dependency on the relayer. The relayer needs to be secure.
And when you talk about the trusted relayer, of course, people talk a lot with respect to blockchains and decentralization, removing the traditional layers of trust there. And so what are kind of the the benefits and the disadvantages with such an approach?
Yeah, the advantage is that it's faster when you compare with atomic transaction. Atomic transaction is very tedious. It has a very not good user experience. The user experience is not very good, and also it has performance issue as well. With trusted layer and decentralized layer, if you can make that layer with multi-party computing and also decentralization with randomness, then that layer can be both secure and decentralized. And also there's another factor here. You can also let the layer, we call it stallman for Wanchain. Let that layer can have a mechanism for staking, which means that the layer need to put some stake through the smart contract to secure the bridge. So that the node for that bridging will not collude. Right? If they collude, then their asset will be slashed. So that is another way to secure the bridge through this staking and slashing mechanism.
And so, sorry, just to confirm, those are with relay bridges where you can actually have staking with them.
Yeah, I use the term relay. It's in Wanchain it's called stallman, and you can also call it bridge node. It's the one that detect the events in the source chain and then mint the same amount of asset on the target chain. So, and that one could be both secure and decentralized. For example, yeah, you can have like 25 nodes, 13 nodes to carry out one transaction from source chain to target chain.
And so do you see that as being a big area of growth potentially for people who are out there looking for yield, say with their various tokens and assets, and actually staking for these relayers? Because it's certainly not something that comes up much in conversation at the moment. More generally in the industry, people talk about yields from DeFi, yield farming, and also being, participating on proof of stake networks. But do you see that as like a big potential growth area?
I think so. It's the asset transfer from chain A to chain B. That thing is going to grow. That's for sure. Because if you look at the history of blockchain, just in the recent years, we always think that one blockchain will become the king, and then the other one are going to die, right? But that's not the case. Okay, it seems that it'll be like internet. There'll be different servers popping up, and in the future, blockchain will just like a server. It's initiate a new blockchain is just like building a server. It's so easy, right? And then you need to look at the bridging of private blockchain with private blockchain with public blockchain with public blockchain. So there's no way you can have a single blockchain that's the king, right? The king. So the bridging will become more and more important. It's just like today's internet, right? It's the internet. Internet is becoming more important than the server itself, than the mainframe that IBM used to build. So that's why I think it's going to grow for sure. Now the question is, which one is going to dominate? Which bridging method is going to dominate, right? And I think they are going to coexist. You're going to have core chain function call. You're going to have atomic transaction. You're going to have relay, the stallman mechanism, the lock and burn and mint, and then burn and unlock. And you can also have some centralized control. And I think if you are talking about consortium like CBDC with CBDC, right? Then like two banks, if they want to connect together, they just need two nodes over there. Each bank provide one node because they're trusted. Then that's easy, right? And then for public blockchain, you probably need to have more of them, have more bridge nodes, and you also need to decentralize them. For example, you can use the POS, proof of stake mechanism, to select those bridge nodes and then to prevent the collusion.
Yeah, and some interesting news I think that came out in the last week on the bridging of CBDCs was Visa talking about doing a proof of concept with specifically that, a technology for the central bank digital currency bridging. So it's I think though as well that it sort of raises an interesting discussion point whether these kind of, like with the internet, you have common protocols that underpin so many, they span all these different industries. You don't have them really sort of too tightly coupled to specific verticals in terms of the network layer. But then once you get into the application layer, you start to have these protocols that are very tied to specific industries. So, in the finance industry, for instance, you have like FIX, FPML, and these sort of data interchange formats, and but then they ultimately, run on top of like the internet protocol behind the scenes, which is that common layer. So I guess with blockchain, you're in this interesting place because you have the smart contracts that can kind of be bespoke for solving problems in specific industries, but then you also have a sort of agnostic, protocol underpinning it all. It's like where does that common, layer end up emerging?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think we are both familiar with EEA architecture. I mean, we know there's a blockchain layer, there's a network layer over there, and I think for CrossChain, the key point is to have something like TCP/IP. And I think if we talk about challenges, and that is a challenge, how can you let different institutes and different public blockchains to adopt a TCP/IP like CrossChain protocol, right, without government involvement, right?
Yeah.
And that's challenging. And I definitely see that coming. And then there's other things as well. When you talk about Visa and another, I know that company and another fintech company, right? And sometimes some banks are running quota, right? So you it's not just Ethereum. So you need to deal with heterogeneous cross-chain as well. And those are things are going to evolve. And today we're just dealing, a lot of time we deal with EVM compatible, but we need to go broader to cover the case where there are quota blockchain, different kind of blockchains that we need to bridge to.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, bringing back to one other topic here, atomic transactions, which you spoke about, and how problematic they are from a user experience perspective. And of course, given that you need a degree of you need transaction finality on the two underlying blockchains in order to facilitate this transfer of assets. Do you think that once the transaction speeds get to a place where they are just faster? I mean, it's a big criticism, of course, for a lot of DeFi users, for instance, that with Ethereum, it takes a long time for transactions to go through. So then Binance Smart Chain emerged. Lots of people jumped over there because they had a much smaller network. They were able to achieve that rapid transaction time because it was in effect a centralized network. Do you think that this, it is as simple as that? Once the transaction speed's going to go up, these sort of more atomic transactions will become more commonplace, or is it more nuanced than that?
Yeah, I think it's both the technology itself and the use case as well, right? We used to say that atomic transaction is a must-have. It's something that we must have for cross-chain. Later on, we find that no, it's not a must-have, because if the bridge is secure, right, there's no need for atomic transaction. Right. For example, in the trusted in two trusted blockchain, in private blockchain, there's no need for that because the bridge is guaranteed to succeed. So, and then in terms of performance, right? I think layer one, we know it won't improve too much, even with Ether 2, right? You have to wait until sharding comes in. Then sharding itself is a cross-chain also, right? You cross different, it's a cross shard. So you have that concept already. And I think, so at this time, we are talking about, for cross-chain, it's in terms of performance, if you cross-chain a layer 2 with layer 2, yes, you can do atomic transaction, probably okay. And then in the future, when you have sharding, yes, you can do atomic transaction as well. But I think even when there's no performance issue, when atomic transaction is all good to go, there is a need for non-atomic transaction if you can trust the layer, the layer that facilitate the transfer of asset, because that make it much easier. You don't need to wait for the other side for the handshake, for the return. For example, for the cross-chain function call, you need to wait for the target chain to respond back. and that callback may take some time, right? So I think the use case, in terms of use cases, atomic transaction and non-atomic transaction are going to coexist for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, like you say, it's a very different proposition when you're looking at two enterprise consortia talking to one another versus,
yeah,
Ethereum talking to Bitcoin or Cardano or Polkadot or wherever else.
Yeah.
So with going back to Wanchain and the kind of bigger strategy here, I mean, you support a number of the major protocols already, and from your perspective as an organization, what's kind of the key area of focus now? Is it getting more compatibility with more chains, or is there very much so? Is the focus still quite very much about the specific technologies and just refining, what you have there, getting it better or getting it faster, getting more people using it?
Yeah, I think the CrossChain is expanding, right? This technology is expanding, and Wanchain is trying to expand as well, and make it more flexible. So as I mentioned earlier in the white paper, Wanchain intend to bridge different public blockchains and then bridge private blockchains. And today we have layer 2 comes in as well. So Wanchain need to bridge with layer 2. And then in the future, if consensus is able to do the CrossChain function call, Wanchain want to endorse that as well. And then there are other cases that Wanchain think are very, very useful, especially when build bridges to heterogeneous blockchains. And Wanchain is also developing some of the methodologies for that as well. Yeah, so Wanchain is becoming even more bridge focused. And then Wanchain may sponsor some of the project. They actually can build ecosystem for CrossChain applications. There's so two directions. One is to build more bridges, advance bridging technology. Another one is to kind of support CrossChain applications.
Yeah. So would it be fair to think of it as almost creating the Cisco for the Web3 world?
Yeah. I think that's probably Jack's goal. But it's so challenging. I think you just have to grow, just to see and grow the technology. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like when you look at the history of the internet and how the protocols and many of these applications that became standards. It was almost just luck in the end, right? It wasn't that you had this huge push from everyone saying, yeah, let's get behind TCP/IP. It was some people did, it got traction, it got momentum, and it snowballed, and we ended up where we are now.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And to do this, if you look at the history of TCP/IP, one of the first things you need to do is to define the unified resources, right? And then today we cannot even do that with blockchain, right? Today, even how do you identify a blockchain? How do you know this blockchain is a real one or a fake one, right? So we have this blockchain ID, but blockchain ID is just a number. How do you prevent the collision of blockchain ID? And then we have EIP 155, but that's just a number. It's not good enough. And there's nothing. If I can just start a blockchain in 1 hour and I call this EIP equal to 1. And then when people connect to my blockchain, it becomes there's a EIP. There's a blockchain ID equal to 1. They thought it's the Ethereum blockchain, but it's not. Right. So we have a lot of things to do with that, with kind of TCP/IP definition. So we actually submit the EIP 3220 to define CrossChain identity. So if we want to start from basic, the first thing that needs to be done is to have a common definition of blockchain identity. And that blockchain identity should be unique and should be identifiable. So it should be linked to the block so that you can verify whether that blockchain has the correct blockchain ID or not automatically. So those are the things that need to be done in our blockchain community. And we are trying to do that as well.
Yeah, and it's a very key point there. It's that notion of how do you have the equivalent of a URI to identify any blockchain, and I presume as well, there's a lot of crossover there with the work that's happening in the identity space as well, like with the decentralized identity foundation and the decentralized identifiers, because of the, in effect, where you have like a verified credential that lives somewhere on a blockchain or data store somewhere. You need to address it in a way that can point to it. And so is there kind of much, I guess, cross-pollination between those ideas at this point in time, or are they kind of evolving separately? Because certainly, as you rightly say, the being able to address something on an arbitrary blockchain, be it like a network identifier or like a smart contract on it or a cryptocurrency account, it's these are key things that need to be there.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. The DID has been explored by different blockchains, right? They all have DID, and then you need to have a unique ID for the blockchain itself, right? So they are together. They should not. Yeah, they're on different areas right now, but at some point they are going to converge and become together. So that the DID has to sit on a blockchain, and that blockchain has to be unique. The identity of that blockchain has to be unique. So that it should be a DID plus blockchain ID at some point.
Hopefully we can start seeing something sooner there, because it makes me think as well of the work, say, that's happening on Ethereum with the Ethereum name service, and trying to take something like DNS, which underpins much of the internet, and providing a way to arbitrarily address these accounts. But if you could take ENS and add this common blockchain identification layer, you've got, I guess, your equivalent to a DNS entry that can point to any computer on the internet.
Exactly right. And that's what with EIP 3220, we define blockchain identity. And then on top of that, we are trying to submit another one, which is smart contract based. And then we need to link that with the EVM, the ECM name service as well, so that we can look up more metadata through the name service. So you just need to define identity for blockchain identity specification. And then from that point on, you can use the identity to define different parameters for that blockchain using ENS.
And is it something that you're also engaging with other blockchain communities for the equivalent? Because the EIP, the Ethereum community are very well engaged with the Ethereum improvement process. And are you doing similar things with other ones, or are you just focusing on Ethereum for the time being until you can get this the traction that it deserves before starting to try and get it over the line with other communities as well?
Yeah, I think the work is proposed with EEA, Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, and they were submitted as EIP 3220 to Ethereum community. And I think that definition is blockchain agnostic. Just any blockchain can implement that. So but at this time we only approach Ethereum type of blockchain. We did not approach how to other blockchains. Yeah, but that is compatible. It's any blockchain can implement that specification.
Yeah, it's certainly be a great initiative to get the whole community behind, because these are very crucial building blocks that you're putting in place here.
Yeah, it really is. It's very critical, and it need to be built early on. Yeah.
And so, apart from interoperability, which is a big and very relevant topic for Wanchain, are there any other areas that you're very interested in of the applications of the technology outside of the interoperability space?
Yeah, I think we published a paper on use cases for cross-chain interoperability, right? So Wanchain itself is mainly focused on the cross-chain application and interoperability, but there may be other projects that want to build the ecosystem, and Wanchain is interesting in supporting those as well.
Cool. And if you were to predict when you think we'll see more kind of widespread interop, and it becomes, I guess, a a normal thing. You can take for granted that, oh, I've got this NFT on this wallet. I'm just going to send it to you, and you're using a different blockchain. How many years away do you feel we are that sort of moment where you can do that without having to go through intermediaries?
Yeah, I think well, blockchain is one of the challenges very dynamic, right? It's very difficult to predict anything. I noticed that Vitalik published a post about he called it CrossChain cross roll up for NFT. I responded to his post as well, and I think we saw through this many times way before Vitalik. The NFT has a value that's very arbitrary, right? If you look at the NFT in the source chain and they say this NFT is $1 million, then you mint it on the other side, and then there's a liability of $1 million for the cross chain, right? And that's a challenge because you do not know that value is real or not. So that's one thing. Second thing is that the NFT is the data transfer, and today what we are doing for cross chain is mainly asset transfer. So the NFT, we need to go beyond asset transfer. We need to go for data transfer. And then, of course, there's also cross-chain function call. So if I'm given a time, right, I think 1 or 2 years is a must to do the NFT. But if you do centralized transfer, of course, it's easier. But you want to really have decentralized and secure NFT transfer, it's going to take 1 or 2 more years.
And talking about the data transfer, because of course with NFTs, that's a very significant thing, because most NFTs do actually have represent an image or some sort of file that exists somewhere.
Yeah.
Where are we right now with respect to the ability to transfer these things, or interoperability, so to speak, to transfer between these different stores? Of course, IPFS has established itself, I guess, as the de facto place for storing data as on a decentralized, distributed file system. But no doubt they're not going to be the only one. And I'd be interested to get your take on that world.
Yeah, so in terms of data transfer, there are 2 things here, right? One is to transfer the raw data, the whole data from a blockchain to another one. Another one is just to transfer a handle of the data, right? For example, URL link, and that's normally happen with NFT. But the challenge is that if you transfer the handle, data handle to another blockchain, then the data handler, which is off-chain, may not recognize that, right? For example, like CryptoKitty, they may recognize a gene on Ethereum blockchain, but if you transfer the NFT to another blockchain, the engine may not recognize that. So that is a challenge, right? And so I think there are different application, different approaches for that. And I noticed that Chainlink is also going for blockchain, CrossChain. They're also proposing a CrossChain interoperability protocol based on their Oracle node, right? So that's another mechanism. So I think that area is still going to evolve. So the transfer of a data handle, or the raw data, and through the layer, or through something like Oracle mechanism, and so that is something that's still going to evolve.
Absolutely, it certainly feels like this year the blockchain space has heated up a lot, but also the interops become a much bigger topic as well. And as you say, being able to transfer NFTs that have arbitrary values on certain networks, it does change things a bit, because you're not just transferring some random data from one place to another.
Yeah.
And so, if you weren't working on with Wanchain, or you've solved the interoperability stuff, where do you think your focus would take you? Would it be back? Would there be areas associated with EdTech, for instance, that you mentioned earlier on, that you think there could be some good opportunities?
Yes, I when I joined Wanchain, I was telling Jack that if I want to deserve my right to build an education blockchain. Okay, so so yeah, I am still very interested in education. So actually, I'm teaching smart contract development as well. So So I'm very onto education still. Yeah. So
Yes.
if we solve, I hope we can. If we solve the interoperability problem challenges, then I can spend my time working on blockchain education. That's an area I'm interested in.
Yeah, absolutely, and hopefully, years down the line, you can imagine there'll be, I help build out this key protocol that underpins, much of today's blockchains, and when you transfer these assets, once upon a time this didn't exist, and we made it possible. So it'd be a fun, thing to have there.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I have been talking with you many times about this CrossChain interoperability. You visited us in the past as well. So it's I think this need different people collaboration. I think it's great to work with EEA. It's a very good platform, and I got a lot of good colleagues to work together on the CrossChain interoperability. Yeah, it's very good. Yeah.
And it's been going for a long time as well, hasn't it? Now was it about 2-3 years old? This working group too?
Yeah. It used to be a task force, and then it became a work group.
Yeah. And for those people listening, definitely, if you want to get more involved in the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, they're always looking to get more people contributing to these initiatives with that. Weijia, one of the things that I'd love to hear as well is, are there any books that have really influenced your thinking around this space, or have really captivated you?
Yes, I do read books, and this is a blockchain. A practical guide to developing business, law, and technology solutions. And this is by Joseph and Paul Allen. I bought this book. I thought this Paul Allen of Microsoft. I actually bought this from MIT bookstore, but it turned out it's another Paul Allen. So, but this is a great book. It's a great book for Ethereum. If you like Ethereum, this is a book you read. And I actually read a lot of these chapters in airplane. So it's a good book. And then I also have this Mastering Bitcoin by Andreas, and then everybody know about this. And this is a good book as well. Yeah. And I also read a lot of white papers of different projects. I actually spend a lot of time reading white papers, and also the Ethereum Foundation EEA website. A lot of those Medium papers as well, and also read the EIP specification. A lot of the under the low level specification, I read those. And also notice that, Conor, you are publishing a book, and I look forward to reading your book as well.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you. Yeah, this should be out by December this year, the Blockchain Innovators Handbook. So I'm looking forward to that. And it'll be fun to have it out there. How do you manage to keep up, though, with what to read in terms of white papers and so on? Because there's so many, right, coming out all the time.
Yeah. And actually, I'm teaching, right? And sometimes we ask students to read as well. So I think I normally select good ones, right? And one of the challenges with blockchain is there's just fast-paced. It's a fast-paced technology, and there's so many information that you need to absorb, right? And I have to pick good authors, good projects, and I read the good ones, or the kind of trusted ones, trusted authors. I really do not read just random publications.
Yeah, no, that's it. And certainly it's easier for us technologists to be able to, at least know whether some people seem like they're legitimately authors fairly quickly, but it's, there's a lot of noise there.
Yeah.
So so Weijia, if people want to reach out to you or follow you, or, just keep up with what Wanchain's up to, what are kind of the best mechanisms for them to do that? Is it, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever else?
Yeah, Wanchain website is wanchain.org, and then we also have a Telegram, and also Wanchain has a Twitter account as well. I normally do not send too many posts with Twitter, and I also you can reach me through email and look at Wanchain's website and contact us. Just go to wanchain.org. You can get a lot of information out of that.
I'm sure the preferred way for people to reach you as well would be by participating in the CrossChain interop working group at the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance.
Yes, there'll be, yeah, I really look forward to people, experts joining the work group to work together to kind of develop this protocol for cross-chain interoperability.
Yeah, it's exciting times, definitely. So, Weijia, thank you so much for your time. It's been really awesome catching up, and yeah, I just love hearing how this space is evolving as well, and yeah, heating up more and more every year.
Yeah, well, thank you, Conor. It's always great to talk to you. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you. Speak soon.